Black smoke coils over Khartoum's skyline, explosions tearing through the capital in a way Sudan has never seen before. What began in April 2023 as a power struggle between rival generals has become a nationwide war that has unleashed ethnic killings, famine, and the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Terrified residents drag suitcases through the streets, children perched on luggage as families flee any way they can. What was once a bustling capital has emptied out, its people scattered towards any road that might lead to safety. Under cover of night, foreign and Sudanese evacuees crowd onto military aircraft, part of an airlift that marked just the first wave of millions of people forced from their homes as the fighting spread.
So Sudan has been at war for much of its history, but this is the first war to break out in the capital, Khartoum. What happened is that Sudanese overthrew the longtime military dictatorship of Omar al-Bashir, who ruled Sudan for 3 decades. There was this big popular revolution. They overthrew Bashir in 2019, but it was actually Bashir's own generals who seized power then. And Bashir had basically done what's called coup-proofing, which is a way of spreading military power into different competing units so that none of them can really threaten the leader itself. This ended up working out disastrously for Sudan because it meant that when the military stepped in to overthrow Bashir, they had to basically share power amid different competing units. So there was the Sudanese army, and then there was this paramilitary rapid support forces, which Bashir had brought into the capital as something like a presidential guard. These two and others basically had to share power after Bashir fell. And then what happened is that relationship started to turn quite rivalrous, and then they fell into a power struggle in 2023, which led to this outbreak of violence in Khartoum, and then that violence spread throughout the country, with the RSF mostly hailing from the western regions of Darfur, and the Sudanese army really with a support base mostly in the center and east of the country.
As battles raged, the paramilitary rapid support forces moved on key targets, storming Khartoum's international airport and rolling through the city in convoys. Their leader, Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hemedti, raised a fist from the passenger seat, projecting confidence that his forces could seize the capital. Across the country in Port Sudan, queues grew for evacuation boats as those who could escape tried to reach the Red Sea and, from there, the outside world.
So you have two main warring parties. You have the Sudanese army, which is an institution that actually predates Sudan as an independent country itself. And then you have this rapid support forces, which is this, legally it was a paramilitary force, but essentially it arose out of a group of Arab militias in the Darfur region that were used by the Sudanese state to help fight a counterinsurgency in the Darfur region some 20 years ago. That campaign led to genocide charges at the International Criminal Court. Over time, those group of militias were formalized into this rapid support forces, which grew into not only a militia but a pretty large conglomerate of business and security and political interests under one particular family, under a leader known as Hemedti. These two sides basically are the ones now fighting this war.
The war shattered hopes born on these same streets only a few years earlier. In 2018 and 2019, protesters faced down tear gas and bullets to demand an end to Omar al-Bashir's 30-year rule. Crowds overturned police vehicles, children chanted for freedom, and a broad, civilian-led uprising toppled one of Africa's longest-serving autocrats.
المواطنين الشرفاء سيتم تشكيل مجلس عسكري لتمثيل سيادة الدولة وتشكيل حكومة مدنية متفق عليها بواسطة الجميع.
The army was demanding that the RSF integrate fully into the army and essentially dissolve as a militia force. The RSF, meanwhile, wanted to maintain its power and saw itself as just as powerful as the army itself. This dispute eventually grew out of control and it led to the fighting in Khartoum. But over the course of this war now, both sides have essentially sucked in the Sudanese across the country into their respective camps. And it's become an all-out battle for Sudan's future, but it also has really resurrected these decades-old grievances within Sudan, including ethnic grievances, regional grievances, long disputes over who rules Sudan, what is a Sudanese core identity.
Outside the defense ministry, demonstrators kept vigil, clapping and chanting for a full civilian transition. For a moment, it seemed possible that Sudan's institutions might finally be rebuilt on different terms. Instead, the old system reasserted itself. Bashir appeared in a courtroom cage, but many of his loyalists remained embedded in the army, intelligence services, and bureaucracy, shaping the fragile transition from behind the scenes. In 2021, Army head Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, civilian Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok and Hemedti sat side by side at a signing ceremony meant to rescue a faltering power-sharing deal. On paper, it promised a path back to civilian rule. In reality, it left the guns and the real power in military hands.
Earlier this year, the Sudanese army recaptured the capital Khartoum and pushed the RSF west, mostly into the Kordofan region and then into its home base in Darfur. The RSF then has looked to reconsolidate its control in Darfur and really focused on the last army stronghold, this town of Al Fashir in North Darfur, the capital of North Darfur. The RSF just retook Al Fashir and committed many atrocities doing so, but this now has created something like a de facto partition in Sudan, with the Sudanese army controlling the center of the country and the east of the country, and RSF controlling pretty much all of Darfur and most of the west of Sudan. So now you have this east-west divide, which could sink into a long-term division of the Sudanese state.
New videos from Al Fashir in North Darfur point to how brutal that partition has become. Reuters verified footage from a university building showing armed men in RSF-style uniforms walking over bodies, forcing a man to kneel, then shooting him at close range. The floor is strewn with corpses, a grim snapshot of alleged revenge killings and summary executions in a city already pushed to the brink of famine. West of Al Fashir, more bodies lie in and around trenches, RSF fighters standing nearby. Satellite imagery has captured scorched earth and burnt-out vehicles in the same area, evidence of the ferocity of the latest attacks.
We've seen momentum ebb and flow throughout this war. So for a while, the RSF held momentum. Then for most of this year, the army had regained momentum. Now it looks like we're in a moment where the RSF has regained some momentum, but no one is really winning this war. Neither side appears to have any real path towards military victory.
On the ground, civilians pay the price. In Al Fashir's shelters and makeshift centers, survivors pick through rubble and shattered classrooms, trying to salvage what little they can from yet another wave of violence.
It's really hard to see exactly how this war will end because the positions between the two sides remain, there remains a very vast gulf between them. So the Sudanese army continues to essentially demand that the RSF do something like surrender, withdrawal from the cities, and disarm. Of course, the RSF takes a very different position and demands that the army completely reform itself. So essentially that the army dissolve and that they reform a new national army. These positions have not shifted hardly much at all over the course of these 2.5 years of war, and the regional supporters backing them have also grown quite entrenched in their positions.
Sudan's war is not just a domestic struggle, it's also a proxy battlefield. General Burhan has long-standing ties to Egypt and Gulf capitals like Abu Dhabi, where leaders have cultivated relations with Sudan's top brass. Regional powers see Sudan as a gateway to the Red Sea, the Sahel, and lucrative investments in land, ports, and minerals.
الدعم الإماراتي التي ذكرتيه لدينا كثير من الأدلة التي تثبت أن هنالك طائرات تنقل الأسلحة من الإمارات إلى يوغندا ثم إلى تشاد.
ضربتنا مصر، والآن أثناء مفاوضات جنيف جابت لكم 8 طيارة كي 8 صينية، المكانات أمريكية. عشان إحنا عندنا التفاصيل.
If this peace roadmap actually progresses, it will go first from a humanitarian truce, then ceasefire negotiations, and then it calls for a new transitional civilian-led government. This would be a very hard thing to accomplish in Sudan at the moment, given the current state. It would obviously be a compromise government. It inevitably will maintain a strong influence for the two warring parties, but it would be a turning of the chapter, hopefully, from this war if they manage to get there. But the path getting there is very, very steep.
In Tawila, the consequences of that stalemate are written on people's bodies. At a small MSF-run clinic, doctors adjust drips for the wounded, bandage shrapnel injuries, and treat the elderly for violence and hunger. Outside, a sprawling camp shelters some of the more than 12 million Sudanese uprooted by war. Many have fled multiple times, carrying nothing but their children and the clothes they wear. Famine has already taken hold in parts of Darfur and Kordofan, with towns like Kaduli and Aldalanj assessed as starving under siege. Rights groups say drone strikes, shelling and ethnic massacres are killing civilians in their thousands, even as the RSF publicly accepts a US-backed proposal for a humanitarian truce that the army has yet to endorse. For now, there is no clear winner, only a country being pulled apart. The uprising that once promised a democratic Sudan has given way to a grinding war that could split Africa's third-largest nation in two and destabilize an entire region. Whether the latest ceasefire roadmap can open even a narrow path back to peace may determine not just Sudan's future, but the fate of tens of millions who call it home.